The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, welcome everybody to today's Management Reporter session. My name is Derek Krebs. I'll be hosting today. I'll start with just a couple minutes within PowerPoint and a few house cleaning little notes to make. Otherwise, the majority of the time we're going to be looking inside the application for nice little tips and tricks to share. So welcome one and all. I see a nice large audience attending live, or many times there might be people subsequently looking at this as recording, which yes, we will record this session and put out on our website. We'll also send a nice little thank you email to those that attended or registered. That way you can view it later or share it with your coworkers. A few little notes about the GoToWebinar is one, there is a nice question area within the control panel there to the right. So if you have any questions throughout the day, please take advantage of that area. Or secondly, I'm broadcasting my email, so please jot that down because in case you have any specific questions, I'll try to field some nice little generic quick ones throughout the day session, but there might be instances where I'll punt the ball and follow up with you individually if it gets a little bit more company specific. And then additionally, that GoToWebinar control panel, if it's ever blocking your view, there's an orange arrow that you can click that's pointing you to the right or left that minimizes and maximizes that window in case it's ever blocking your view. All right, so as I continue, let me just take a moment to further introduce myself. My name is Derek Krebs. I'm a senior consultant with the MSX Group, and I've been doing this for many, many moons, going on about 25 years now. I've been a consultant strictly devoted to financial reporting and budgeting software. And like my background you see on this slide, most of the staff at MSX Group has similar. So if we turn the clock back 25 years, most of us started at FRX Software. We had such great reporting and budgeting applications that Microsoft acquired us, and we internally worked at Microsoft for close to 15 years, helping develop, consult, and support on those flagship products. On the reporting side, there was FRX, later then branded as Management Reporter, and then secondly on the budgeting side was Microsoft Forecaster. Then approximately 10 years ago, we got spun off as the MSX Group, and instead of two separate programs and applications on the reporting and budgeting side, there's now one called Prospera. I'll further allude to in just a minute in the next slide. So there's a little bit of my background. In today's session, in just Management Reporter, there's going to be a mixed bag of attendees of, let's say, beginning, intermediate, and advanced. So this is just going to be a nice little 1-hour crash course of looking at the best features of Management Reporter to acquaint you with. So I'll further just talk briefly about a few product releases, then I'll jump right into the demo, and just a reminder occasionally for the nice little question and answer queue that I'll probably do twice during this 1-hour call. Maybe about midway through, I'll check the question area, and definitely toward the tail end, we'll reserve for a question and answer session. To be aware of the current product releases for Management Reporter, they used to come out Microsoft with these every quarter, but nope, as these products have now been sunsetted and no longer developed, the latest release for Management Reporter was back in 2017, what they call Management Reporter 2012, and they had 16 cumulative update or service pack releases over time, so that's the latest greatest. On the budgeting side, for those that might be using Microsoft Forecaster, that latest release is version 7, Service Pack 5. And then lastly, even though FRX has not been touched for many, many years, back to 2011, the latest release, we still support hundreds of people on the FRX application today. So we're here to service your past, present, and future needs on those. So rest assured you'll. Okay, now further news on Management Reporter is there might be some of you that are moving toward or already have Microsoft Dynamics 365. Basically, Microsoft plugged and played the Management Reporter product. They basically shoved it into Dynamics 365 to do a reporting there, but they actually removed some features and no longer developing it, but that is still available as a common question we get asked for those moving to Dynamics 365 here. Microsoft Forecaster, that came bundled many times with your license packages, so you might already own that. So do check some of your licensing and service packs, and I could always help with more information or questions you have on that. Then finally, that last little bullet point, most have transitioned to Prospero, which is now, instead of doing double your work on the reporting and budgeting side, it's now one cohesive tool with tons of new product features. So be aware of maybe some future webinar sessions that we'll share. Speaking of, there might be one or two other house cleaning items I want to further acquaint you with. That is, you probably found out today on the webinar, maybe through a newsletter, a little monthly one we send out, but on our website, msxgroup.com, you'll see some upcoming events here in the top right-hand corner of webinars. So across the Microsoft products, and especially I see a few also that are transitioning to Prospero on today's phone call. Be aware of those because we have close to maybe 8 to 10 sessions every single month, free and out of the comfort of your own home or office to give you further product knowledge and tips and tricks. Then additionally, I would like to call your attention to twice a year, we have our user forums in the fall and springtime, and that's 2 full days of about 7 or 8 hours of sessions over 2 days, all free, online, and even CPE credit for those CPAs in attendance. So do maybe look for upcoming events to please attend. Now, as I'm going to share with you a nice little crash course, there might be a lot of tips that you might refer back to. So one other little goodie I wanted to share with you to lead in the session is, if you do not have the Manager Reporter Training and User Guide, it used to be available on the Microsoft website, but I think they've removed the link or made it so hard I can't even find them myself. So if you do not have the Manager Reporter Training Guide, do jot my email down, and I'll be sure to send you a nice little link where you can download these, because there's approximately maybe 20 chapters as you see me broadcasting here, maybe about 20 pages in each, but great screen captures, great step-by-step on such. And then how about on that note, let me even pull up a slide that usually I conclude with, but one would be my email, just to jot down in case you just now are attending it live. Additionally, please take advantage of that question queue on this live session, but if not, please send me an email, and we would be, as an added benefit, we even can follow up you on a free 1-hour phone call if you have any company-specific questions. So please take advantage of that little free 1 hour we can do to review your existing budgeting reporting setup to provide tips, tricks, or questions that you have. And then finally, we also have, for those people considering moving off of the old legacy products of Microsoft, we do have a free trial version of Prospero, where even we can convert all of your FX and Manager Reporter reports, which is a great, huge win and differentiator of Prospero to save you tons of time and money. Otherwise, competing products, you have to redo everything from the ground up, which could be several weeks, months, almost $100,000 of effort on that regard. So wanted to invite you personally to some of those aforementioned items. Now to the fun of today, being the tips and tricks. Let me just start bullet pointing a few. I probably won't read all of these. I should be able to cover most within my today's session, but one of the key things I'm really going to emphasize, especially if people might be new to the application, is great design in the reports where you have basically a row and column for every report. That's required. And then you can leverage the reporting trees to take one report, like an income statement, down by, let's say, the different companies, location, or departments utilizing a tree. I might show you a graphic here in just a second. Then additionally, when we're producing our financials from our general ledger database, we can easily consume that information and drill down to the account and transaction level. So I'll be emphasizing some consumption of reports down to the account and transaction level, including maybe vendor or customer that came from as well. That also speaks to secure and electronic report distribution, because we don't want the wrong financial data getting in the wrong hands. So we always preach the secure and electronic way to consume the data here. And that's also going to be presentation quality reports that you're going to be doing. So if ever I hear you're taking reports out to Excel and further tweak them and make them look pretty, I cringe, because there's more efficient ways to get to your end goals. Speaking of your end goals, it might just be good old manager reports, or another goal might be some month-end reconciliation you do, or maybe even audit reports for audit time. Or maybe a second goal might be, of course, who I'm sending the report to. It might be a CFO, meaning to see it in a summary flavor, or it might be an individual departmental manager, meaning to see more detail. So I'll be further describing maybe some different audiences and goals through today's session. And then some miscellaneous bullet points there at the very bottom. We're going to talk about report groups and schedules, how I can run multiple reports all at once. Perhaps also linking to non-general ledger data, like Excel linking. And there's also, we want to make sure our reports are accurate, so there's going to be some nice little checks and balances, missing a duplicate tips I'll provide. So now without further ado, let me show you one or two other last little slides, especially for those new people attending today that have not really seen Manager Reporter. Let me just give you a nice little visual to when we create a financial report. You basically have two required building blocks of the row and the column. Like here to the left, in the blue block is our row definition and an example of an income statement. Or the second required building block for each report is the column definition, like in red, where we're doing month and year-to-date figures. And then third and optionally, at the very top is represented by our reporting tree, which might be our different companies, location, departments. And then what's nice is I can mix and match that same single row, like there in blue, as I'm going to go to the subsequent next slide. And really, I'm just using a different column. But I can mix and match and reuse that same row over and over and over. But this column in second report might be an actual versus budget report. So there's one example. I'll be sure to pass along this slide, but this slide deck is a little bit more abbreviated, just giving an introduction, but I'll be sure to pass that along with maybe that link to the training and user guides I referenced earlier. Now let me jump now into the Manager Reporter application. And when I do so, usually I like starting with the viewer. There are actually two different flavors of the viewer. One is called the web viewer, and then the second, the client viewer. We're currently seeing the web viewer, meaning any browser or internet window, like Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Firefox, you name it. You can then consume your financial reports. Or in other words, you do not have to install anything, which is great. Now, alternatively, especially for you power users, that usually is the audience for these sessions, like those in finance and accounting, what I want to show you is instead of the web viewer, I'm coming here to the right in what we call the client viewer. Now, I prefer the client viewer in several reasons why. One is I think it has better graphics for me, a power user. Secondly, it also gives me additional administration, like here in the lower left, what's called the report library. This is just a nice little central repository where you can store and segregate your reports into different folders that might be date-driven, like what I'll call year one or year two, or you might store your reports in group-driven items, like here's for my board of director or CFO, etc. And that's the report library that I'll get to a little bit later in today's session here. But I'm going to come back to the report data, and now this is the client viewer, but I'm going to come back to the web viewer. Now, within the web viewer, and then here's where I'll tease Microsoft a little bit, where we worked internally about 15 years of a little bit of old, dated product, hence the Prospero. You'll probably hear me mention a few times today's session. And then also it's a little bit sparse of the postings, but we want to keep the data a little bit clean and not bombarded with too many rows or columns of data. So in the web viewer I'm currently at, this is an income statement, and if any report in the web viewer, if it utilizes a reporting tree, I'll call your attention here in the lower left to the reporting tree button. Here's a report, like an income statement, where we're broken it out departmentally, where by default, we always view our report looking at all departments, like the top node of the tree, or then beneath it, we have 5 different departments like sales, administration, etc. Now, there's 2 ways I can then consume some of this report data. One is starting from the top, like all departments. I'm going to drill in randomly to this line here called employee benefits. Now, when I click into a line, it's going to show the next level within the reporting tree. We only see one line of data because only one department has information for that account. I just clicked on the back button. I'm just going back up the level, and I'm doing something similar where I'm drilling in. Only one department has data, but there might be instances where you see multiple lines if multiple departments have data. So instead of me starting from the top drilling down, there might be instances where I want to go directly to a single department like administration. Also, based on my user security is what I might be restricted of seeing. Now, within this financial report, I even can drill down to the account level, which this is what we call level number 1 of 3, the financial level. I'm now drilling in. This is what we call the account level. Now here you see in our chart of accounts, we have 3 segments. Segment 1 is our department, like 100 I'm currently in. The middle segment is our account, like 5150 is employee benefits. And this last 2-digit third segment or dimension is our project. Now this is the second level of 3, the account level, and I could even drill down to the third transaction level. And when I do drill into the third transaction level, what we can additionally add to the right are what we call transaction detail fields that might additionally show vendor or customer information. And on that phrase, let me show you a couple key design elements within the designer product, because I was just in the viewer just then. I'm now clicking on this application, what's called the Report Designer. So that's for you power users in the finance and accounting area, where you create and design your reports, like I'm currently in the report where here is maybe my row definition that I'm using, or second piece of the puzzle required being the column definition, and here's just a list of the different rows or columns. And third and optionally, yes, I'm using a tree of my different departments. Now, what I just quoted for transaction detail, including vendor or customer, I'd say 2 key concepts I want to share with you. One is when you set up or generate the report, doing so with all 3 levels, financial, account, and transaction. Sometimes I shy away from transaction as I'm doing preliminary monthly reports because I don't want to wait longer than I have to as it processes, but maybe when I'm done with a month and I want to send it out to managers, then maybe I'll turn it on transactionally. Second key concept, in addition to this detail level, is I'm going to navigate to the row, column, or tree of this report, starting with this button here to the right. I'm going to open up this column that we called current year to date. Or additionally, I have icons in the toolbar that opens up the row, column, or tree that I've defined for the report. Now within the column definition, I'll try to catch myself to not make this too much of a in-depth training class, which we do have some either remotely or one-on-one with the organization. But in addition to these column types, I'll just probably abbreviate the review of a column definition. A financial dimension column really just means I'm grabbing data from the general ledger. And when doing so, you might have definitely actuals you're grabbing from the general ledger, or in our demonstration database, we have a few different budgets. That way, if I wanted to compare actual versus budget, there'd be a key field in doing so. Now, the next couple of fields are what period and year I want to report on, and it references the base period or base year. And those are going to be driven and are going to grab from your general ledger based on the report date. So I'm going to click on this icon to go back to the report I started from, because then I want to emphasize whenever you generate a report, you'll define a particular period and year to run it for. And that's what they call the base period and base year. Now, a further example is if you wanted to grab this year and last year data. As I go back to the column, I'm going to example here to the right, looking at last year. I just simply on this year field chose a financial dimension column, which then populated the cells beneath it here. And I simply then edited this cell year to be -1 year ago, or base -2 for 2 years ago. And within each of these little cells, if I double click in it, usually you have a nice little wizard of reminders of choices available for you. And then how about finally the key concept, because there's going to be a lot of other tips and tricks I want to try to cram in. Let me now call your attention to when I spoke of drilling down to the transaction level, you can add what is called an attribute column type to your reports. And when doing so, these columns will only be seen or populated when you drill down to that lowest transaction level. The first 2 levels, financial and account, you would not see any information here within this attribute or transaction column. And what I'm currently showing you is a nice detailed list of different transactional fields here. Now, probably 95% of what I share with you today will not matter what general ledger system you're on, but this might be a rare field based on what Microsoft general ledger system you're on, of the different transaction fields it retrieves. So we're actually connected right now to a Great Plains database, and there is a field, what's called the originating master record name. That is the vendor customer. So definitely you can include that in your column. Then when you or your managers drill into the report, they'll be able to see that further transaction information, along with other posting dates, journal entry number, references or descriptions, or some other key ones within this field. All right, let me now turn my attention back to the viewer. I was looking briefly at the column definition, and let me just take just a moment to look at the rows and tree used for this report. Starting with next, the row definition. We have some sales here in a total, cost of goods sold, where I'm formulating my profit in profit percent. So maybe a few minute tutorial on row definitions and the key items contained within. So I'm going to click on this designer. I'm currently in the column I last was in. I'm going to go back to the report definition and then to the row of my report. Now, key fields are going to be your account descriptions and the corresponding account numbers here. And I'm going to even open up this link because in our demonstration database, we've generically named our segments. Segment 1, and it would probably read something like this on your setup. Segment 1 is our department, or segment 2 is our account segment, like revenue, expense, and balance sheet, or segment 3 is our project. I can come up here and zoom in to see my chart of accounts as I'm just clicking on an extra pop-up window or two. Now, there might be instances like this detailed report. You want one account per line of the report. I'll show you even how quickly I created that row format from scratch. And then additionally, I can also use ranges and wildcards. Let me example a couple of ranges and wildcards. I'll even pull up a balance sheet summary row definition for that, because here is where I might again grab an individual account like account 1800, or when you wildcard, there's two ways to wildcard. One way is using the old technique, meaning the old FRX application used question marks for wildcard, but now the more efficient Microsoft Manager Porter way is using an asterisk for the wildcard. So for an example here is those accounts that begin with 11 I could do, or alternatively, I'm just going to click on this pop-up window where I could do a range, where whenever I do a range, I would recommend just typing directly into that window, meaning maybe account 1100 does not exist. I did not choose it. I typed it in. Same story here, 1199. That does not exist in my GL, because if I chose that from the pick list, I only get to see accounts that exist here, which might be only through 1190 today, but maybe to allow me more room and reduce or avoid maintenance going forward, make that range as broad as possible. There might be instances where you have what I call ugly chart of accounts, where you cannot easily have some ranges or wildcards. So another tip is to use or create what is called a dimension value set. Now, how about for my real world example to that, how about I might have 3 different income statement reports in different summary for my CFO versus banker or my manager, but how about in all 3 of those reports, I have a line called cost of goods sold. But maybe cost of goods sold is very ugly chart of accounts where I don't have a clean wildcard and it's changing all the time as new accounts get added. So what I can do is I'm just going to pick on one of these random rows as my example. Now, after I've defined the different accounts that are included or maybe excluded, and here's a quick little note on exclusions, because maybe on this line, I'm going to grab all accounts 2105 to 2099, but there might be some weird account like 2110 I want excluded. So here to the left, I just change that from adding to a minus sign, which means I'm going to exclude this account 2110 from the range above it. But now after I've defined these various accounts that I want included for this report, I can then create what is called a dimension value set. I'm going to do one little toggle here, because one of the consistent spots I always can find these dimension value sets is found under Edit, Manage Dimension Value Sets. Now this is available within any row, column, or tree, which I'm currently in the row. And as I continue, I'll maybe do 2 examples, because I can create a dimension value set on my account segment, like cost of goods sold I'll continue with, or What's also nice is I can create a dimension value set on any other segment. Like maybe on my department segment, I want to create a group or named item of all my research and development departments, or all my admin or manufacturing departments. So of those two examples, let me continue. The first one was on the account segment, which in this little pick list in our demonstration company is segment 2. And then here you see a list, like here's my cash, and below where I've defined my cash accounts, or here's my cost of goods sold account, and I can simply click on the new button, give it a name here, which I'll just call it test for right now. And then here maybe cost of goods sold is all the 5100 accounts, and then maybe it's 5205 through 5211, et cetera, et cetera. And then I'll just stop right there. But there's where I just clicked on the new button to create a new dimension value set, or otherwise the modify button allows me to modify existing or previously created ones. Now let me go full circle, because now that we see these dimension value sets, I might be in one of those 3 rows or report of an income statement, but in a different detail for the different audiences like CFO, etc. And then here I'm going to come into one of my links for the account segment, segment 2, I was just talking about. And then here is a button. Instead of me choosing accounts or ranges, there's a button right beneath it where I can point and refer to one of our dimension value sets. Like here's my cost of goods sold. Once I click OK a couple of times, then you're going to see the word set, and then in parentheses your set name. And I might have maybe 3, 5, or 10 rows all referring to that. And if I change my mind, I just go so in one spot, meaning any row, column, or tree, does not matter which you're in. I'll return or go to Edit, Manage Dimension Value Sets. And how about a second example I'll wrap up with is, instead of segment 2 on the account segment, how about segment 1 is our department. Maybe here is my manufacturing departments down below. Or maybe here are my marketing departments. So that way I can have some easy and consistent filters across all my reports. Now, one even added benefit, because I still call this segregated and disparate. There's no checks and balances amongst these. So a new feature for those that I see on this call that are moving to Prospero is Prospero has a much robust and better feature to this, using what we call account trees, where within account trees it prevents duplicates. And also I can see missing orphans, because I really do not have that visibility on these dimension value sets as they're currently defined. So basically another way to phrase that is we took the very best things of Manager Porter and also the budgeting tool Prospero. Instead of 2 applications, we brought that into the one Prospero. So one extra little sentence or two for those that I see in the call that are currently migrating to Prospero. Now for one of my next topics, I'm going to segue to creating a new row and tree from scratch. So let me go back to the report designer. And maybe one other thought I want to do, check off my list, might be a great opportunity for me to do so, is I always want to ensure my reports are accurate. I can't tell you how many times over these 25 years and hundreds of customers helping, I've seen that $1 million mistake where they've maybe have a bad formula, or maybe they've missed a revenue expense or duplicated one. Now in summary, I'm just going to show you maybe one of those 2, finding missing accounts. Now first tip and trick is, in every row format, like here in the income statement, but I might do something similar in a balance sheet, add a check row. So here's an example of a income check row, because above is where I'm formulating all my revenue expenses. I'm summing those up, and net income here at the very bottom, I'm keeping my fingers crossed and hoping and praying that's accurate, but I can ensure that accuracy by adding this check row. This check row simply grabs in one row all my revenue expenses, which is really this one range from account 4000, that's our first revenue account, through account 9999, that grabs all revenue expenses. And all these accounts grabbed those balances and brought into one row, all net to net income. And I'm making this check row that I'll call it. I'll make this no print, as here's a print control for such. And then really I just have a row here, add a balance, which hopefully is 0 and does not show on my report, because usually I suppress and do not show rows that have no balances. So you see here my out of balance. If I'm out of balance, that's my nice little visual cue I need to reconcile my report. If that out of balance does not show, life is good. I do not need to worry about what I'm about ready to take you to, which is maybe define missing or duplicates. And then for time's sake, I'm going to come up here, and whenever I'm out of balance, you would see that row in your report. Let's call it $50,000 I'm out of balance. Well, one of the first things is I would then delete these check accounts, because if I left these accounts in here, I would not have missed any revenue expenses. Also, I'm going to delete these accounts because I would have duplicated every account. So for an example, account 9410, we see on this row code. Also, I'm bringing in account 9410 into my check row. And what I just quoted would be what the duplicate warning would tell you. It would say on this row 5530, and down below you have that account 9410 in 2 or 3 times based on how many times we accidentally brought that in. So long story short, once I'm out of balance, I'm just going to come up here and type in some dummy or bogus account that I know does not exist in my general ledger. And maybe two, what I'll do is, here is maybe 2 accounts that I'll pick on, like 8301 and 2. I'm going to come up here and just type in 8301 to show you one example of maybe where I'm missing an account, like 8302. Now within the row definition, define missing accounts, I'm going to go under Tools, Missing Account Analysis. And what it's now going to do is it's going to comb through all my rows, columns, and trees, even though I'm only going to example this one income statement, meaning not balance sheet. And then here on the top half of the window, I would scroll down. And then here, for an example, is one of my row definitions. I'm just going to use one for time's sake. So here is what I'll call row number 1, my balance sheet, and then down below the accounts that I'm missing. And I can come down here below, I can copy and paste that to Excel and back in the product, because maybe of these 20 accounts, maybe 19 of them are old and I know I don't use, but maybe some of them are being used. So if I just come up here and copy and paste, I could then bring in the account number back in the application here. Okay, and then here is where probably I didn't need to do that one extra little click here, but then that's basically my account number. I can then bring back in the application here, which I do have some other hidden columns here, so excuse that example, but there are the accounts. I could then just paste back into my row definition to see which of those multiple ones had in a balance. Now to wrap up, even though I won't have time to show you, I just showed you missing accounts. I was in a row under Tools, Missing Account Analysis for that. However, duplicates, I'm going to go back to the report. On the Output tab, there's this one little check mark to turn on for reporting duplicate accounts. And then where you see these duplicate accounts is in your client viewer, not the web viewer. So there's another reason why I favor this. In the client viewer I'm in, if I go here under View Duplicate Accounts, and then if I click on the next button, which I'm going to pause for a second, it will then say, hey, you might have account number A or B duplicated 2 or 3 times on maybe row code this or that. And really row 640 is my check row. That's why I always delete those check accounts first and I replace it with a bogus account like account 9999 to go full circle with that thought. All right, so I was in the client viewer under View Duplicate Accounts and turn that on within the Report Definition Output tab. Okay, good. There's maybe about 4 or 5 little tips and tricks in this first few minutes. Now, let me come up here. I'm going to see if there's any questions in the queue I can field. Otherwise, I'll end today's session with such. And looks like there's no current questions in the queue, so I'll go ahead and continue. Let me show you how I can create rows and trees from scratch. This detailed income statement, I'm going to come here under New. I'm going to create a new row definition, and then secondly, I'm going to create a new tree. Like the departmental one, we saw that income statement was broken down by. So within the new row, I'm going to come here under Edit, Insert Rows from Dimensions, which really translates another way, hey, I want to grab all my revenue expense accounts, not only their description, but the account number. so I do not have to build this from scratch. As I continue, by default, you're going to see two symbols here. The ampersand or hook is always going to be by default in your main or natural account segment, which for us demo data is segment 2, which means build the row on that segment. These ampersands are hooks. Otherwise, the pound signs will be on your non-natural account segments, which means do not build the row in this segment. And then if I wanted to only bring in revenue expenses, I'll just do something like the example earlier. Then once I click OK, there it grabs all the account numbers, it grabs all the descriptions, and then here for any accounts that are credits, like revenues these are, by default you'll see this letter C here, the normal balance, which, hey, instead of showing as a negative credit, shows a positive. Now, this is what I'm going to call the existing or old manager reporter way. I'm a little spoiled because as new accounts get added, let's say I added a new account 4119, you're going to find yourself many times having to manually add rows and accounts. So I'd have to come up here, right mouse click insert, account 4119. Maybe I add that new account this month. So in other words, too, for those people that are moving to Prospero on today's phone call, we have instead what are called summary accounts. Like I might have a summary account called total revenue, which might be all the 4 prefix accounts, which in a tree like the dimension value sets in Prospero, you just have a wild card, so you never have to update your tree in Prospero, and you never have to update your row definition in Prospero as a new account gets added. But in the manager reporter era or world, yes, you do, but there's a little note or tip on doing such and checks and balances for that. Now I could have also built this row on other segments. So let me just show you a new row. Now instead of building on the revenue expense or account like balance sheets, let me just show you another example. I'm returning to edit insert rows from dimensions. Instead of me building on my account segment, I'm going to say nope, change those to all pound signs, and maybe instead I'm going to build it on department. So I'm going to change these department segment 1 to all ampersands or hooks, which means again, wherever you have the ampersands or hooks, build it. Now on this report, let me now go full circle with maybe 2 other flavors to an income statement. Well, here is what I'm going to call flavor number 1. Now every report that I look at, there's going to be some things that I'm going to like about it and some things that I do not like about it. Well, one thing I like about this report is I might have a lot of rows of revenue expenses detailed out. Secondly, in the column, I might have a lot of columns like a rolling 12-month actual budget variance. And then third thing I might like about this report is I can then start from the top and drill in or maybe look at individual departments, because maybe I'm just the administration departmental manager, and maybe that's the only unit I can see when I open up this unit of the tree. That's what we call tree security. Maybe time might allow me to go into security a little bit, but maybe not. Now that would be flavor 1. A lot of advantages to it, but now what I want to show you is flavor number 2 of a report, where instead of my departments being in the tree and me toggling between those, let me show you maybe departments side by side in my column here. And the key concept of this report, once I broadcast it, and this little button to the left of the generate is a shortcut and tip to pull up my last ran report to save time. However, if you make any journal entry postings or you change your row, column, or tree structure, you'd have to regenerate the report, but to save time, I'll pull up my last ran one. Okay, and once this broadcasts, there is a nice little side-by-side comparison of my report, meaning here's department 1, 2, 3, 4 side-by-side, so I almost always recommend and have one of these reports in my arsenal. Super easy column design to this, where we're using just dimension filters in the column definition. And let me show you that. Back to the designer. I'm going to open up the column definition. And there's really two ways I can filter in stuff side by side in my column. I'm going to start with a more common field, what's called the dimension filter. And then the second technique is using the reporting unit. Let me start with a more common one. And when I double click on this window, this is the same identical window we saw also when we're in a row definition, but usually the row brings in your account like segment 2 for us. However, this example is in segment 1, which is our department. I'm just now zooming into the different departments that you see there in the background. Now, same type of story. I can use individual departments like yes, we're doing, or otherwise I can use ranges, wildcards, or dimension value sets. Now, this dimension filter is the more common way. If you have multi-company and multiple databases you're retrieving from, then what you're going to have to use to grab multiple companies side by side is, one, if you're grabbing data multi-company, you have to use a tree. Second thing is then you would use this reporting unit field to point to a tree. So how about here to the right, I'll just example it without having to go to another third or fourth report. I'm just going to call this company number A and company number B here. Maybe I want to do side-by-side company reporting. Now to repeat, I have to have a tree first and foremost. Now when I go inside this reporting unit field, my first step or click of 2 is to choose a tree. And here's my pick list of the different trees. And let me just choose my company consolidated tree. And then how about this company number A is my United States company? Or how about the column to the right is my Canadian company? And what I'm now going to do is segue to trees for a couple moments for today. But there is the second field I must use if I wanted to show companies side by side, what's called the reporting unit, and then me being required to use a tree. Let me even create a new tree from scratch, or I'll even review the one from the report earlier I ran. In this departmental income statement, let me use this icon to open up the tree. We have here to the left a graphical view of that tree, like the yellow folder is my summary unit, and then the child units beneath it. Or here to the right, we call that our graphical view to the left, but to the right, our worksheet view. Now, if you're multi-company, here is be a field because I really just grabbed data from what I'll call company 1 and company 2. And then here in the company consolidation tree, great, there's maybe company 1, 2, and 3. Now notice in this tree, by company, the dimension filter is left blank because maybe I do not want to break this down by the different location and departments of, let's say, United States. I only have one unit of the tree for the entire company. No dimension filter, not broken down this company by location department. But in contrast, under window is another way to toggle between the different things. I'm going to go back to my departmental tree because be aware of this dimension filter, because in this example, we're looking at a single company, but then we're breaking it down by all the different departments. And how we created this from scratch, let me do so. Under New, Reporting Tree, I'll continue under the Edit button, similar to what we did in the row, but I'm going to come here and insert reporting units from dimensions. Within this pop-up window, what it's by default going to do is build your tree on your non-natural account segments, like segment 1 is our department, segments 3 is our project. Now additionally, you have account categories where you tag your accounts as cash, receivables, sales, cost of goods sold, etc. So no, I'm not going to build it on segment 2 or account by default, and no, I'm not going to build it on the account categories I just quoted, so I'm going to turn that off. I could build it by both segment 1 department and segment 3 project, but I'm going to turn that off and only build it on segment 1 or department. I could restrict what I bring in, like if I only wanted departments 100 through 199, I could do so, but I'm not. I'm going to build and bring in all departments. And then once I click OK, those departments that have postings and data, because there might be departments that have no postings, they'll be retrieved. So here is now the dimension filter automatically populated, the descriptions you have for the GL for those. And maybe the final thing I'll do for the trees is maybe twofold. One is if ever you want to create a new parent or consolidated unit of the tree, I'll show you how to do so. Or secondly, I'm going to show you what's called tree security. Now the first of those two items, let's say I'm the manager of both administration and the accounting departments. And great, I love seeing my two departments, their figures, but how about I want to see them rolled up in a new consolidated unit? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two simple steps. Here in my worksheet view is step number 1, just like Excel. I'm going to right mouse click, insert a unit. I'm going to choose my company, just focusing on a single one. And then here I'll just call it something like new summary unit. And then I'm going to stop. Unlike me grabbing data directly from the general ledger and all these other units, this is eventually going to be a parent summary unit rolling up the data of the children beneath it. And then my second and final step would be here in my graphical view to the left. I'm going to highlight these two units, and I could come using the toolbar icon, this right arrow to demote. Now I no longer can further demote those, but I could do the reverse. My left arrow now is enabled. I can promote them, which means shift it into the left, which I'm just returning to where I was before. Or I'll go back to the right, demote that unit. Or my second example, that was a nice one where my units were side by side next to one another. And then my next example is going to be for non-continuous units. So how about administration service? How about these three randomly? I want rolled up in that new summary. I just held down a control key. And then I'm going to drag and drop on top of any one of those three that's lit up. Does not matter which. I'm going to left mouse click, hold down on top of one of those. I'm going to drag it on top of a new unit. And then I'm going to let go. And we call that drag and drop. Otherwise, earlier was the promote or demote, which I also could do through a right click, like you see the toolbar icon to the left. All right, now great. I have this new summary unit that if I were now to generate the report, I'd get the best of both worlds, meaning I get these three individual departments. Then also I'd get a summary roll-up of those three. Final key concept maybe for reporting trees is tree security. Because how about on this report, perhaps I do not have access to see all departments. So how about Bob is only Department A administration? Or how about Sally is only the accounting department? So whenever they open it up, maybe that's all I want them to see. So as I return back to the tree, we have here to the right a field what's called tree security. I'll do two examples. One is if you apply security, make sure to add yourself, meaning the power user, or even I create a group or role called maybe the power users. Under security, here's this button here called users and groups. My first example of two in this field is going to be for you power users. Inside designer, there's a button here called security. I would simply create a new group called power users and accounting. And then here's that group now I'm going to refer to. That how about of these 20 people on today's phone call, all of you in the accounting, so you're in that group. I've already added you here in the lower left under security. But once I click OK, now when all of us in accounting open up this report, my last click and intent is to have us view all the child units, because here in the background, I was on the first line or my summary. So now I'm going to add us all to the child units as well. So now when all of us in accounting open up this report, we're able to see all of our units. So make sure you add yourself. Otherwise, you won't be able to see the tree units, even though you're our administrator, if you apply security. And the second final example is, how about here? I'm going to highlight sales department, security. How about then in my users and groups? How about that is good old Nick Surser. And then here, then whenever Nick opens up this report, he or she would only be able to see the unit I've defined. And obviously I can apply Nick or other people to other units like we saw for accounting. Okay, that's what we call tree security. And there's maybe a second level of security, what is called folder security. Now, I'm a little spoiled too, because this is what I'm going to call decentralized, because I'm only in one tree and I have maybe about 10 or 15 trees here. So I call that decentralized. Secondly, I'm about ready to take you to what we call folder security. In the report library, I have to secure at each individual folder level, but a now new huge win in Prospero is we have centralized security to streamline this further. Let me now share with you the second thing after tree security we just saw. I'm going to go back to my client viewer. I'm in the report data looking at one report. I'm going to come back here to the report library. And earlier I could come up here, right click and create a new folder. However, let me now show you what is called library permission. And I call that folder security. Because let me even say here in my board of directors folder, I might have my balance sheets and cash flows only they see. So I'm going to right click for the library permissions on this folder. And then I really have a little field here of who can see reports in this folder. Once I click on the add button, it could be individual users where you see this single head, like here's Charlie or Noah. That's a single person. Otherwise, where you see multiple heads, that's a group, like the accounting group, et cetera, my sales group. And then once I click OK, now for most people that are outside of finance and accounting, they would have the view button only. But if it's anybody in the finance and accounting area that I trust to be able to edit, create, and delete reports over time for cleanup, then I might have the other 3 check marks. But otherwise, most people outside of finance and accounting, I only have view permission only to the report. And that is what we call folder security. As I go now and wrap up, I right-clicked for the library permission, folder security. I did refer to Security Inside Designer. Let me just show you that ever so quickly. And then here under the new button, I did earlier a new row or a new column or tree, excuse me. But down here, I could also create a new group. Like here's my group called Accounting we saw a few times. Click on the add button. And then how about I add Bob, Jane, or Sally? Okay, so that's how easy it is. I can create maybe groups. Okay, I'll probably wind up with security. Let me leave off some final little notes on report viewing and consumption. We saw earlier down to the account and transaction level on a report, but let me share with you some other efficient strategies, what are called report groups. Because how about at month end? How about all the 20 or 30 people on today's phone call? I send all of you, my managers, 3 reports, an income statement, actual versus budget, and maybe an income statement rolling 12 month. So what I could do easily is I can come up here and create a new report group, just give it any name, and once I save is where I'll be prompted for it. But really what I'm doing is I'm clicking on the add button, and then here might be report 1, balance sheet, or I'm going to click on the add button. How about report number 2, one of my income statements? I could add more reports thereafter. Now, what I can now singly and consistently do across all these reports in the group is define my good old detail level, like the good old financial account transaction we spoke of earlier, and then consistently I can run all these reports for a single month and year, which, sorry about our Microsoft's old demo data, but how about let's then just say I want to run it for August, all these reports. I now just click on generate, and then that in one fell swoop will run all these reports. And I have a few options of my output electronically to the viewer, or it could be a little hyperlink like we saw in the web viewer. I wish I could output directly to Excel. I wish I could output directly to the printer or PDF. We cannot, but in Prospero, we brought those features back that were widely asked for that Microsoft removed. But a few little thoughts. Now, as I start winding down, just have maybe about 5 minutes remaining. Let me look again just to see if I have any questions in the queue. And in the meantime, let me also pull up a contact information for anybody that came into the session live late or that are viewing this recording. There's my contact information and a nice little invite again for either a little one-on-one session if there's any questions I'm not able to field here. Or additionally, for those people that are considering Prospero, we have that nice little trial version where we convert all your reports to test drive that application or demonstration of. Looking back at my question queue, it takes me a few little clicks to do so. Bear with me a moment as I do so. All right, I see no more questions in the queue. Let's see if there's any other little things I want to share with you. How about in the report group or schedule? Let me take that an extra click or two further. I'm going to close this one I started from just to show you how easy it is to create a group and add reports to it. But to consumer report group, let me just show you one of 2 ways. Well, one way is me, a power user. I'm usually in the client viewer. I usually have a folder called my current reports. Like here, this folder right here, what I call the root library folder, I output all my reports to what I call this current folder. And maybe only I in the accounting area have access to it. And let me show you or rephrase that a different way. Because if you do archive your reports, which I'm not a big fan of sticking old reports into a January folder, I'm not a fan of sticking old reports to a February folder, because rarely do I go back in time to look at old reports that does not have my current data. So one extra little tip is I'm opening up an individual report, but the same concept could be for a group of reports via report collection. Let me show you on the output tab that I have this one field here where I define where I'm going to output my report to. Instead of me every month changing this to January, February to March, which could be very painful because I'm only on one report, changing it maybe to a different January or February folder, do not do that. That's very painful. Instead, just output all your reports to what I call a current folder that only you in finance and accounting has access to. And then when you're done with the reports, which I'm going to go back to the client viewer, let's say these are all the reports that I just ran this month. Then what I could do is I could just come up here and move these, like drag and drop, or I'll just right click and move them maybe to what I call an archived folder to save you some little clicks. Or better yet, have a nice current report that does a rolling 12-month or looks at this year, last year, so I don't have to go back to my old archived folders. So that's usually how I'm consuming maybe report groups and collections through the client viewer. Now, let me also show you inside a report group what you might see via the web viewer. So in this month-end report, I'll open it up using this icon shortcut here to the left. And then here, if you're looking at a report group through the web viewer, here is what I'll call report number 1, like the departments that I had in columns. Or let me show you report number 2. Now, I created this row, but I never showed you the full completed version of it, because instead of me building the row on revenue expenses, here's where I built my row on the departments. And let's say I'm a McDonald's franchise where I might have 100 locations going in my rows, and then instead of revenue expenses being my row definition, here's where I use the dimension filters, not bringing in department, but in my column, I use dimension filters to bring in revenue, cost of goods sold, etc. And this might be a nice little who's who report, where I might see my 100 different McDonald's locations here in rows, and then in columns I see revenue expense, and even I can sort it. Notice this net income column. I'm sorting the best profit producer here at the top, the worst at the bottom. I even can drill in to see the account and transaction levels we saw earlier, which there's the account level, and I could have gone down to the transaction level if included. All right, and that wraps up my time for today. So there's just a few extra minutes I'm going to cram in. Otherwise, a big thank you again. One final look at the question queue. Looks like there's none. Otherwise, thanks for joining us live or via the recording, and we'll definitely send a nice little follow-up email thanking you as well, where you can also retrieve these recordings or see future sessions as well. Otherwise, my name again is Derek Krebs. Thanks for joining us today, and have a good rest of your afternoons. Goodbye.